when people say, what about sports specific stuff? I'm like, that's why we have practice. Strength and conditioning isn't practice. It's quantities, speed, power, strength. And sometimes I think people can try too hard to make it cross over.
This podcast is brought to you by Force 8 Coach, your sport, your platform. Welcome back to my podcast called Science in Sports. I'm your host Simon as usual. I'm a former pro hockey player myself, now working as a sports scientist for a second division ice hockey team here in Germany and also for the under 17 national team as a strength and conditioning coach. And today I'm joined by one of the pioneers of modern strength and conditioning, Mike Boyle from the United States. Hi, Mike.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy. I told you before, I'm really, really happy that we managed to find a time. It's not always that easy with the time difference from US to Germany. So I'm very happy that you're on my show today and we can talk a little bit about strength and conditioning, athletic performance, and probably also how things changed over the last couple of years or also decades. But before we start, could you please give me a quick introduction about you, how you got started in all that business of strength and conditioning?
So this is year 44, I think, or 45 of coaching for me. I got started I was very, very lucky. I landed at Boston University right out of college. And obviously Boston University has been, for that entire period, a power in United States collegiate ice hockey. So I was sort of right into it right away. I didn't start working with ice hockey. I linked, like most strength and conditioning coaches, I initially was interested in American football. It probably took me 3 or 4 years there to get going. Late 80s, I got started with the ice hockey program and have stayed with the ice hockey program from probably about 1987, if I'm going to guess, maybe 86, up until 2012. And then during that time, because strength and conditioning was very much in its infancy and very much part-time, I was able to work for the Boston Bruins at the same time I worked at Boston University from I think the 90 season through the 99 season. So I got to spend about 9 years in the NHL during a really fun time. Strength and conditioning was archaic and Stone Age at that time in the NHL, but there were some great players and some great experiences. And in trying to think what year, 98 would have been the first Women's Olympics. So I started with our women's program in 1996 when they first started to put together the idea of having an Olympic team. The Olympic coach who got selected had been our assistant, Ben Smith, at Boston University, and he came to me and said, some of these women are going to move to Boston to train for the summer. Would you train them? And I said, yeah, I was training everybody else. Why not? So we actually ended up having about 30 people who eventually comprised that 1998 team that won the first gold medal. So I've had some connection with our women's program from 1998 right through actually to this Olympics. So I've never really stopped working with our female players, and I've still continued to work with our American NHL, AHL guys even after I left Boston University in 2012. Worked for the Boston Red Sox in Major League Baseball for a couple of years, but we have our off-season NHL, AHL guys are started last week. So we're actually 2 weeks ago. So we're in week 2 for some of our guys right now of our summer program. So
that's awesome.
Brief rundown.
Brief rundown, yeah. You shared a lot already, though. I mean, in 44 years, what you said, a lot of things that you experienced, and happy to get some of your information probably out of you today. But before, I want to just a little interesting question for my background in hockey as well. Where did your love for hockey come about? Was it something that you were just thrown into and you just loved to work with those guys, or why is hockey like the big part of your career, or one of the biggest?
Because I was at Boston University, and Boston University, if you've seen Miracle. So when I got to Boston University, It was, again, very early 80s. We had just come off the 80 Olympics. We had 4 BU players who were obviously became
Okay.
famous for being on that 80 Olympic team and were a big part of the movie and have been a big part of just US hockey since that time. And I was lucky enough. Dave Silk was one of the first guys I met who was on that 80 team. He was actually playing in Germany in the DEL, and he came in and started wanting to talk about training. And this might have been 83, summer of 83. So one of my kind of first contacts was actually a hockey player more than anybody else. And like I said, relatively quickly, probably again, early 80s, I don't even know, 84, 85, 86, somewhere in there. It's hard to keep track. Ben Smith came to me and said, hey, we really need to be I was working with basketball and with American football, and he said, we really need to get our guys doing this. We've got to get on a strength and conditioning program. And it just, honestly, they were the program at Boston University that had a chance to win a national championship. And I think at that time, as a strength and conditioning coach, you're thinking, wow, this is the top division. These are the top players. These are guys that could go on to play professionally. And we didn't really have much of that in our American football or our basketball program. So I think that was the big attraction. My father was a basketball coach. I was a swimmer. I had no real hockey connection. It just was, I think very much a lot of my career has been a situation of right time, right place.
Okay. You briefly mentioned the word stone aged when you talked about the strength and conditioning back in the days when you started. I mean, it's a big term to put it this way. I wasn't even alive when you started as a strength and conditioning coach, so I'm interested in how it really was, let's say 40 years ago, in comparison to how it is now in the modern age. Let's just phrase it this way.
Well, I mean, the modern age, if you think about this, I mean, no computers, no cell phones, no sports science. It was, we had a lot of guys just didn't train at all. It was not unusual to have guys who just showed up and said, okay, season's starting, I'm ready to go. And they had done nothing. That was not unusual at that time. So just the idea of saying we're going to have an organized program and we're going to train X number of days a week and you're going to have to be here and it's going to be mandatory. And even then, there was a lot of, I can always remember there were guys always working on their wrists, wrist curls and doing all these things. It's going to help me shoot. And the good thing for me, I think sometimes the fact that I wasn't a hockey person probably was an advantage because I just used to look and think like, that's silly in terms of if you have no legs, then who cares what your wrists are like in terms of you're never going to get to shoot the puck anyway because you're never going to get the puck. And so the difference was in 1980, let's say 6, we took what then would be considered a very, very progressive step. We took, because I always said what we were doing with American football, even American football was kind of Stone Age, but I had been heavily influenced by track and field. So we took a very track and field approach. And from that time, it was still primitive, I think, in terms of it was still very bilaterally oriented. It was still kind of a squat, bench press, power clean kind of strength program. But even that was extremely progressive at the time. Just the fact that we're going to train for power. We're going to train our lower body. We're just going to do things, and we're going to be on an organized program. We're going to be on a year-round program. It's not optional. We're not going to let guys decide whether they want to work out or not. We're not going to let guys pick what exercises they do. That stuff, at that time, that was all considered to be very progressive.
Yeah. Did you have, or when did it start that guys were using softwares to measure specific data or lifts, for example? I mean, even before those.
This is year 44. I will tell you that we've never used software to measure specific data or lifts, ever.
Okay.
I think the sports science thing is just a fad, truthfully, and I think that eventually we're going to get back to coaches that can coach. I think right now we've become we love the next new thing and we love to be sort of data obsessed and data reliant. And the reality is you still got to train. Like, if you're not monitoring anything, then there's nothing to worry about, right? And I think what's happened, we've gotten really into the data side of it and software and VBT and all this stuff. But to me, it still really comes down to, can you get the guys to train? Do the guys come in the room and do the guys train? Because if not, then, you know, I could look at you and say, hey, I got a really good test and it told me that you're weak. And then we did it again and it said that you're still weak. Then I don't know what the value of that data really is. But we were testing, and we were testing strength, we were testing speed, we were testing vertical jump. So we were getting data, but I think the testing devices have gotten much better. When we started, it was a big deal that we had a Vertec and that we could measure vertical jump. That was a big deal. It was a big deal when we bought an electronic timer. If you can imagine, our electronic timer had a wire and a start pad. So we had literally 40 yards of wire. And we would just unroll 40 yards of wire, and they'd put their hand down on the pad, and when they took their hand off, that would start the timer, and they'd sprint through the timer to wherever it was. But so I guess in some ways that stuff has always been around. But I tell people, you know, we had a yellow legal pad and a pencil. We didn't have a computer. But all of those things, I think, are in the nice to have category. But what you really need is somebody that understands strength and conditioning, that understands exercise technique, that can actually coach, that can get players to do what they want them to do. And I think what I see a lot of times now is I see guys that they're great data scientists, but they're not very good coaches. And so you might have lots of information about why your guys aren't succeeding or why your guys are getting injured or why you're not making progress. But the fact that you can monitor all those things is not all that relevant. I think we're going to go back, and I believe people will look back 10 years ago and say, oh, Mike Boyle was saying that 10 years ago. I believe in 10 years, people will say, God, I need a really good strength and conditioning coach. I need a guy that can coach. I need a guy that can get in the weight room and interact with these guys, because you're going to end up with a lot of kind of nerdy little data scientists who aren't good coaches, but they impress management because they're dragging their computer around and they're showing them all kinds of nice graphs and they're saying, oh, yeah, no, look at this. And management, I think, loves that stuff. The players, not so much. I think the players get it. The players understand that, okay, I have to get stronger, I have to get faster, I have to jump higher. Like, those are still, the basic metrics haven't changed. Like, I kind of laughed, like, you know, the force plate gives you a lot of information, but when I talk to the force plate people, I always tell them, okay, what do I really need to know from this? And they're like, oh, you could find out 100 things. And I'm like, tell me the 5 that are most important. Tell me the 2 that are most important. And it's like, and they're like, oh, but there's 100. And I'm like, I know. Great. I'm glad there's 100. I'd like to know the 5 that are really going to matter to me and move the needle. You know, is it rate of force development? Is it eccentric utilization ratio? You know, what are the things? And I think we'll find eventually that we'll realize, hey, I need a few pieces of tech. They're great to have, but they're not going to be what really moves the needle with the players. They're going to be what they are. They're going to be tools to monitor the work that you're doing. And the tools that we have to monitor the work are getting better and better, but that doesn't make the work better. So I think that's where I think that's a big disconnect that I see. I think the guys that I know, at least in the US, the guys that are doing a great job are great coaches, particularly if you look like in the American college system. The guys that are winning the national championships are guys that are really good strength coaches. And yes, I would say they're data informed, but I don't think they're data driven.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you are, because I think it's good to be studied, or you have the theoretical knowledge and how to research and how to use all those softwares nowadays. But if you want to be a good strength and conditioning coach, you have to be in the weight room, like you say, and you have to coach. And the more you coach, the better you get at it, especially as a strength and conditioning coach. And the example you just said with the US college situation, I think I talked to Ron McKeefery on the show as well, and he was or he is, maybe he is still in the college football world, and he also shared the same mindset that you just shared of you have to be in the weight room, you have to coach, and the more you coach, the better you get as a coach. And I think it's a important step. But to be able to use those softwares, especially now that it's getting better and better, is also a good skill. But then on the other hand, to like again, you said you don't need 100 metrics for a jumping plate. If you have the 2, 3, or 4 different metrics that you really use and you really follow along, or you analyze over a full hockey season, for example, that's enough, in my opinion. You don't need that 100 metrics for a jump pad. You need
Right. And
those
I,
one or
I think
two.
though is we've gotten everybody's gotten very obsessed with the sports science part of this thing, and I think that's because it's very, as I said, it's very appealing to management.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, you're absolutely, you need to understand it, but if it's what you're best at, you probably won't be a good strength and conditioning coach. You're probably better off being, hey, go be the sports scientist and let somebody else go in and coach. And
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think they have to be separate roles, but I think a lot of times they lend themselves to different types of people. The guy who's maybe a great data scientist probably has a different skill set than the guy who's a great strength coach in the weight room. I think if you find somebody who really can do both, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
I do believe we'll be looking back and saying, because it's the same thing, the hockey season, it's long. It's a human relations job in terms of, particularly if you're working with a professional team, they're playing a lot of games. You're almost trying to coax or coerce guys into working out. Like, you need to get them to continue to do the workouts. It's not easy. There's this ability to kind of think, okay, what am I doing today? Am I pushing? Am I pulling? Right? Am I
Mm-hmm.
trying to drag it out of them? And that's an interpersonal skill. I think we've got way too little emphasis on the interpersonal skill and way too much emphasis on the I don't know, the data skill, the mechanical skill kind of part of it that I don't think, as I said, I just don't think it's as important. And maybe I'm people say, oh, he's just an old guy, he's in his 60s. But I don't think so. Our athletes are still having really good success. We're having really good success. The people that we train are having really good success. And as I said, we don't own a force plate. We still are surviving right now with jump mats,
Mm-hmm.
jump mats, and arena geared timers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that and heart rate monitor
Yeah.
is about the extent of our tech. And you talk about software. Well, software is pretty much Excel and not much else.
Yeah. Do you have movements or drills for the weight room that you, looking back over like 40 years, that you still are emphasizing, which are, let's say, one of the more important drills for hockey players in general now?
It's interesting, no, because if you look at the evolution, I was like everybody. I was probably a big back squat guy in the
Mm-hmm.
80s and 90s, and then probably going into the later 2000s, or actually even maybe later 90s, I was more of a front squat guy. And then let's say early 2000s, I really embraced the unilateral stuff. We were always doing unilateral work, but not probably as our primary exercise. We were really, really big hang clean people. And I would say now we're sort of somewhere split between hang clean and weighted jumps. And lately we've been playing with more, I've been playing a bunch with single leg cleans and single leg jumps. So single leg hang clean, single leg
Mm-hmm.
dumbbell jump, things like that. So interestingly enough, the exercise that has probably hung around the most is the bench press. That's
Okay.
probably not changed a whole lot. But again, I
Mm-hmm.
think it became, as we looked at shoulder injuries, we became very pulling oriented in terms of, hey, initially it was, I just wanted our guys to be able to do chin ups. So I thought it was a big deal if you could do 10 chin ups. And then we got to the point where guys could do 20. And then we realized,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we don't want to train for endurance anymore. We need to train for strength. So we started to strength train our chin ups. Now we've got, routinely, it's not unusual to see our athletes with 70 or 80 or 90 pounds So, if you're looking at, if we're looking at kilos, like guys doing 40 kilos for a single in the chin up, I've
Yeah.
got female players that'll do 20 kilos for 2 or 3 reps. So it's been a very slow evolution for us. And I would say right now we're very short sprint oriented, which I think I always say we always ran fast. I don't know if we always ran sprints. I think there's been a big change in the last 10 years of timing our sprints. And I think that's made a really big difference, because sometimes I would look at it and think, in some guys' cases, I don't know if they ever ran as fast as they had to run when we weren't timing. Whereas now that we time all the time, like probably every sprint we run is timed, we're doing things in the 95 to 100% range a lot from a sprint standpoint. We do probably more maximal jumping than we've ever done in terms of, we're probably on the mats a couple times a week during the summer doing maximal effort vertical jumping. We're pushing unilateral strength in a way that, again, I would tell you, years ago, I would have told you if somebody could do a one-leg squat with 100 pounds, they were crazy strong. And now I have guys that can do 100 pounds for 5 or 6 reps. I've got college kids that can do that. So I think it's evolving. It's evolved to more sprinting, more jumping, more unilateral work. And probably the upper body strength stuff has evolved to the point where we put a very equal emphasis on pushing and pulling. But I would say our upper body work looks more similar to how it looked 40 years ago, whereas our lower body work doesn't.
When you say, one more question to that, let's say athletic performance aspect, you said single leg squat, so you mean rear foot elevated, like the Bulgarian style?
Now we're doing more what I would call pure single leg squat, so not rear foot elevated. We were big rear foot elevated people for a long time, more than a decade. And what we started to find was that it became more of a way of, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how much weight I can do. How hard am I going to pull with my back leg? And then we just switched over to a one leg squat. So you're standing on a box and you're one leg squatting, and that, what I would call pure unilateral work, no outrigger, no split stand, no nothing, is more of what we do now. Not only what we do, but more. There's more pure unilateral than there ever was. We do a one leg squat, we do a skater squat, and I would tell you right now, those were our 2 primary lower body exercises. Based on, I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Natera's work, but Alex is a Australian Rules football strength coach, and he done some really good research on unilateral work. And one of the things that he said is that he basically took, and this is why, again, I always say, I always sound like I'm not a sports science guy, and then there are times when I am a sports science guy. So he got his guys on a Smith machine and a force plate and started looking at the relationships of one leg squatting and 2 leg squatting. And basically what he found was that a 2 leg squat with body weight and a 1 leg squat, or so with body weight, a 2 leg squat with a load equal to your body weight on your back was equal to a 1 leg squat done just with body weight in terms of forces on the ground, loading, things like that. And so we started to really look at that. And basically what he said is that if you can 1 leg squat 50% of your body weight, you are equivalent to a double leg back squatter. That's what the number showed him. So, let's just say, and he uses, a good thing is it's a great European example, because he uses a 100-kilo man with 100 kilos on his back, right? A 100-kilo man with squatting 100 kilos is going to be equal to a 100-kilo man with 50 kilos of external load. Single leg.
Yeah.
So we started really pushing our guys to get to that 50% body weight mark. And I think that's been a really good thing for us, because when we started, most people couldn't do it. And now I would say pretty routinely, a good percentage of our athletes can do it.
Okay. And I just wanted to ask about that single leg squat to get to my original question. When you said the single leg clean, I think it was, same
Yes.
procedure to don't have it on a bench or somewhere on a
Right.
rested
You're
position?
just standing. Yep. Some people do like to put the foot behind just for balance. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think athletes that can Olympic lift are athletic enough, and
Yeah.
we're quickly getting above 50% of what they could double leg clean very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's interesting.
it's pretty interesting. It's one of those things where people have been talking about it for a really long time, and it's just something that I didn't embrace. And then we brought a guy named Ryan Barrett, who had said to me, "Hey, I've really kind of embraced this idea that you talked about a long time ago with single leg cleans, and I really think it's moving the needle for us." He was feeling like he was really seeing speed increases, because one of the things that we found with our athletes is as they get better at the clean gets more difficult for them. Like it gets to be way more technical in terms of, if you're going to get someone, let's just say, who can clean 100 kilos, they've got to be a good Olympic lifter.
Mm-hmm.
But if single leg cleaning 50 kilos, you don't really have to be a good Olympic lifter.
Yeah.
It's not all that heavy. And then you realize, if I can get that guy to single leg clean, 60 kilos, 70 kilos kind of thing, now I've got somebody who's really got some pop in that one leg.
Mm-hmm.
And he felt like he was seeing that translate into sprinting, which ultimately for me, I always feel like if what we're doing from a lower body perspective is not yielding a lower sprint time or a higher vertical jump time, it's probably not doing what we need it to do. So I think that's where you've got to kind of look at, are you just training to train, or are you training with some sort of outcome in mind? And so for us, we're always looking and thinking, hey, I want everybody's vertical jump going up, and I'd want everybody's 10-yard dash time going down.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we've become big. Like, again, if you run into the name Tony Holler, but Tony's an American track coach, and he started popularizing this idea of flying 10 time. And so we've become big flying 10 people, because it's a really easy metric to monitor. Because what we used to do back in the what I would say, when we first started timing with hockey players, we were spending a lot of time trying to teach them how to start, because the start really matters in any short sprint. Anything up to even up to 40, 50 meters, the start really matters. But when you start doing fly times, the start really doesn't matter. You're going to start from a standing start, and you factor out the skill of starting. And I wrote an article years ago called "Should We Even Teach Starts?" Because I thought, how much time did I waste trying to teach a hockey player to do a 3-point kind of American football combine sprint start?
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted that time change, then I needed the great start. Whereas with the fly 10s now, I've eliminated that. So we just play with different fly-in lengths, 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, 20 yards, and we just monitor their best time at all those distances. And we're always it's like one of those, we're always trying to get PRs. Like, hey, we want to get a PR from 5, we want to get a PR from 10, we want to get a PR from 15, we want to get a PR from 20.
How far, when we talk about flying 10s, let's say, how far do you go from the actual start that you don't time to the start of the flying 10?
That's what I said. So we start at 5 yards. So basically the first phase, the first couple days, is a 5-yard fly into a 10-yard sprint.
Okay, got it.
We're always timing the same 10-yard segment. Okay. But eventually, by the end of the summer, we're running 30 yards or 30 meters. Mm-hmm. So we would be doing 20 yards into a 10-yard fly. So that's probably, for us, for the average team sport athlete, that's max velocity. Mm-hmm. Because even a lot of our guys, when we look at 15-yard fly to 20-yard fly, there's not really that significant a time change. It would generally be, like, I would say, a 0.02. So if I've got a guy who runs, if he can run 104 with a 15-yard fly in, he might get to 102 with a 20-yard fly in. It's not going to be this. It's sort of like all the acceleration is over. And with some of the younger athletes, it's over after 20. Mm-hmm. So it's
do you change up the sprinting drills? Let's just phrase it this way. It's easier for me as a German, for different positions, as, let's say, forwards or D-men, that they start in different scenarios.
Everybody starts 2 foot standing start going forward.
Okay.
Because again, I'm looking at it. I'm not thinking of it from a specificity standpoint. I'm just thinking
Mhm.
about it from an acceleration or a max velocity standpoint. So it doesn't really matter. I could say, hey, this guy's got a, because again, when you think about it, even when you really know the game, obviously everybody's, it's really the forwards. Like if we think about the game, the forward is the guy that's going to have to turn and skate forward.
Mhm.
D is already going to be facing forward. So some people would look and they go, I'm going to have my D, have to pivot and do it. And it's like, no. I mean, if you really want to think about speed, basically your defenseman is going to be pretty much always facing the opposite net if he's good.
Mhm.
Whereas your forward may in fact be, having to be turned around more. But in reality, if you really think about the game, almost everybody, when the puck transitions, will be facing in the direction of the opposite net and will be accelerating. The difference sometimes, obviously, and we have played with a little bit with like shuffling into a sprint kind of thing. Okay, 2 shuffle steps and then sprint, so that they have to make that transition from lateral to linear. But I don't know really when what we're really looking for is just that maximum acceleration or maximum velocity. I don't know if changing the stance is like more so. We've played with it with baseball more because I do think they have, like, if you think about baseball, American baseball, well, actually any baseball, but they're going to be running, they're going to be lateral and then have to turn and be linear.
Mhm.
And that's a skill that probably isn't as much present in hockey. In hockey, it's going to be just more like break, accelerate. So I don't worry about it as much.
Yeah, you gotta go on the corners, track the puck or pin the D, and then go back to the net, back out to the D who shoots it or whatever. How is
Right.
there a
That's more reaction. Like I don't even look at
yeah
that as speed, because you're not, anything that you're going to do kind of in the defensive zone is not going to be done anywhere near full speed when you really
yeah
think about it. You just can't, like, you don't have enough room, you don't have enough steps to get to, when you start thinking about maximum velocity, full speed, it's it's Connor McDavid picking the puck up, in the opposite defensive zone and then just zipping out of the zone and suddenly blown by guys. So, and that's where I think sometimes we get too worried about. I feel like we have practice for a lot of the sports specific stuff. So when people say, what about sports specific stuff? I'm like, that's why we have practice.
mm.
Strength and conditioning isn't practice. It's quantities, speed, power, strength. And sometimes I think people can try too hard to make it cross over when you kind of look at it and think, if we're going to make it cross over, let's get on the ice and let the sport coach actually do that. Or
Mhm.
let's get, we used to sprint. We were big on ice sprint people when I was at Boston University. I think we were doing timed on ice sprinting long before most people were doing it. I would say probably, we started timing, I'm going to say early 2000s, maybe even around the year 2000, we were timing guys on the ice. And because it was very interesting to see, one, we wanted to see if it correlated. I always thought it did, and it did. Our fastest guys off the ice were our fastest guys on the ice almost all the time. Like if we looked at any team and ranked guys, whatever, 1 to 25 on ice speed, off ice speed, there would be no outliers. There would be no one who was like, oh my God, he's the 25th
Mhm.
best, but he's the fastest guy on ice. It might be a situation where number 1, 2, and 3 were slightly
Got
different,
switched up. Yeah.
but it was not significant at all in terms of our guys who could skate, could sprint on land. And it was extremely rare to find somebody that didn't fit that mode. Same thing with vertical jump. Our guys that could sprint on ice had the highest vertical jumps. It was extremely unusual that we would find guys who were fast on the ice and were not in our highest vertical jump group. So that's when we started to look at some of this stuff and say, okay, what really moves the needle is the speed and power aspect. So when we trained in the off season, I guess we were training. I always tell everybody we were training like a combination of a track sprinter and a track thrower. Our lower body training was then very Charlie Francis influenced, who was Ben Johnson's coach, one of the greatest sprint coaches ever. And our upper body training was probably influenced more by what the best shot putters and discus throwers were doing. So you start looking at some of those guys, and they were just getting strong as hell. Like if you look at those guys, they would just how much can I bet?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so we were trying to get guys, just at that time, get guys strong. And now it's still get guys strong, but I guess it's a little slightly more, you could say specifically strong or functionally strong in terms of being strong on one leg. But we still know that guy who's strong is generally going to be the guy that's also strong on the ice. And again, I always say, somebody always has the outlier where they say, oh, I worked with so-and-so and he wasn't strong in the weight room. And I get it. There's always in every activity, there are outliers. But what you need to look at, and again, this kind of goes back to the, whatever the data stuff, right? You got to start looking at the data and saying, yeah, but if you're looking at if you look at the data, you'll see that the best land sprinters and the best on ice sprinters, it correlates pretty well. The best on ice sprinter and the best vertical jumper, it correlates pretty well. Like it was, the difference thing that it didn't correlate to, talent. Like you never look
Yeah.
if you looked at goal scoring or points or any of that stuff, now you're not going to see any correlation at all. The best guy in the weight room is not going to be your best player.
Yeah.
But our whole thing was that what I want to do then is get our best players better in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if I can bring them up into that top group from a speed and power standpoint, then they're going to be significantly more effective. And a lot of times our most skilled players were oftentimes our worst guys in the weight room, particularly sometimes in the beginning, because they were guys who maybe never had to rely on that skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, they thought it was unimportant. And then we get guys who, I can remember having guys early on in my career who were like, I don't like lifting. I'm not good at it. And I would look at them and say, that's why you need to do it, because you're not good at it. You're not going to avoid it because you're not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I talk about the coaching part is much more important than the data part. Like I can identify and say, hey, Simon's our best player. He's also our weakest player. Now I need to get Simon to come in the weight room with me and like the weight room and want to get better. How do I get Simon to do that? If I'm like, a meathead kind of strength coach who all he cares about is how strong Simon is, Simon's probably not going to identify with me. But if I'm a guy who Simon thinks, hey, all Mike wants is for me to be better,
Mm-hmm.
then that guy's probably going to get in the weight room and he's going to train. And that's why we had a lot of success with our guys at Boston University. At one time, we had a really inordinate amount of guys who were going on to play in the National Hockey League. It was very much everybody was looking and saying, what's going on at Boston University? But what was going on was that we were getting our guys in the room. We were getting our guys to embrace the training process. And it was a very, it sounds a little touchy-feely, but it was a very non-judgmental environment. Like I didn't care. What I cared about was, are you committing to the process of getting better? And I used to say to some guys like, well, I'm not really good at this. And I'm like, hey, something, you're really good at hockey. And what we really need, the way we win is to have guys that are good at hockey. But if I can take that guy who's good at hockey and make him a little faster and make him a little bit more powerful and make him a little bit more able to give a hit and take a hit, we became a much better team.
Mm-hmm.
And over that time, I would say we won 30 games a year for close to 20 years. So we were pretty good.
Wow. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's a really interesting take that you take the guys who are the producers, let's say the scorers, the playmakers on the ice, and to get them to buy in just a tiny bit more to make the team better, because it's not like you shared as well, it's not the punishment of a strength coach to force them to work out, but if you can bring it to them in the way of, if you're working out a bit more, you will get even better, and then the team gets better, and it just this positive spiral. That's an easy way to get the players to buy in, I think, and also a very effective way to push the team even further.
Yeah, and that's what we did, and we were lucky in terms of we had a lot of guys who did in fact buy into that system and who did gain weight and who did then go on and make NHL teams. And suddenly everybody else, like, it just became, in our environment, it was just, if you came to BU, it was because you wanted to get better and you wanted to play in the NHL. That was why you came. And I won't say everybody who came went to the NHL, but a really inordinate number of our guys went on to play at the NHL level. And a large number of them were guys who were not great prospects when they came to Boston University. They were guys who were undersized and probably weren't considered pro prospects because they didn't have the size and strength. Because, again, I can remember in the 90s, it was, I mean, the NHL guys were significantly larger than the college guys. And now that's not as much the case, but in the 90s it was. When you looked at the, kind of the Cam Neelys of the world, those guys were 6'2" and they were 220 pounds. And, we had college kids who were, we could have kids that were 5'7" and 160 pounds. And they were, literal boys who were expected to go to the NHL and play against men. And it was kind of like, but when you got to 190, suddenly you were like, okay, at 190, I can play with these guys, particularly if I'm fast. And it ended up happening exactly that way.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, I have one more question. I don't want to take your time up too long, but one thing what interests me a bit is you worked a long time in strength and conditioning, and I think you shared you're over 6 years old at the moment. So what's like a thing for you that still excites you to go into the weight room, to talk to the guys, to work out with the guys, and what still like fires you up to coach?
I'm 66 and I love coaching. I love being around the guys. I love the process of getting better. And I love the fact that we don't have it all figured out yet. I think it's awesome. And I think people, it's funny because people, I have critics, and very often the critics will be critical of the fact that I change my mind a lot. And I look at it and think I change my mind a lot because I'm a lifelong learner. I'm committed to the idea that at some point I might be able to look at you and say, I figured it out. This is the way to do it. I will also tell you, more than likely, at 45 years of experience, that will never happen. Because there'll always be somebody who will come along with something and you'll think, wow, I got to try that. I love that. Whether it's the Alex Natera stuff, we're playing around. I'll shout out zero RM isometric straps. They're made, I think, in Spain. But we've been playing around with ISO stuff, and we bought these ISO straps, and we're playing around with basically a combined regimen where right now in this phase we do an isometric set, we do an eccentric emphasis set, and we do a concentric set, but all the same exercise. So for instance, our split squat set one might be like an overcoming isometric type of thing, pulling against the strap. And then set two will be an eccentric emphasis set where we're lengthening the eccentric contraction. And set three will be our conventional concentric contraction. I don't know how much difference that's going to make, but I have a guy, Nick DeMarco, a coach that I really respect, who's been playing around with that process. And I think, hey, why not try that? Maybe this is something that will help us move the needle a little bit. And so I think there's always something out there, whether, like I said, whether it's Alex Natera stuff, whether it's Tony Holler stuff, there's always people that are thinking maybe a step ahead of where you are. And I think the big part of the job is continually finding those people. Yeah. And I'm really lucky. Like I think a lot of my, there's a kid named Hunter Eisenhower who's at Arizona State, who's been talking about forces versus loads, which made me really think, wow, forces versus loads, right? What are we really doing? We're probably force managing versus load managing. So looking at what are the forces that people are experiencing versus what are the loads that we are putting on them? There's a kid named Tommy Monday who's in the UK who's been looking at kind of, I won't even say velocity-based training, but looking more at sort of training more across the spectrum of contraction speeds. JB Marin has been looking at sprinted and resisted sprinting. There's all these people out there doing great work. And all I want to do is find all the great people that are doing great work, read the great work, and figure out, hey, is there something in it for us? That's my goal all the time. Is there something in it for us?
Yeah.
And
to be open-minded.
Yeah. Open-minded. Yeah, really, but really open-minded. Like, openly pursuing, not just willing to listen, but out there looking. I think that's the difference. Like, open-minded says to me that, well, if you tried to convince me about something, I'd listen to you. I'm open-minded. I don't think that's really it. I think it's more like growth mindset, if you've ever read Ruck's book. In terms of, I'm not only open-minded, I'm aggressively open-minded. I'm out there looking, trying to figure out I always think, who's doing it better than me? Right? Because I want to know who that person is, and I want to know what they're doing. Last thing I want to say, Jim Setters. I don't know if Jim is still around over there in Germany, but I came over.
Is
he? Oh, Jim is the best. Jim brought me over. I actually spoke at a couple conferences in Germany. I would say probably in the 2010 range when he was directing the German Ice Hockey Federation, and he was great for you guys because, again, open-minded, right? That guy who was saying, hey, who are the top people in the U.S.? I want to get them over here talking to our coaches about what they're doing from a training perspective in the U.S. So, Jim, if you're listening, we remember he was great to us. Jim and his wife treated us wonderfully.
Yeah. Maybe he is listening. I don't know, but if I get a hold of him, I'll
hears it and tells him.
Yeah. If I get a hold of him, I'll let you know that you were on the show.
Okay, please do.
Mike, on my end, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said at the beginning, it's not easy to make a little podcast happen with the time difference, but I'm very grateful and honored that you were on my show today and shared some of your insights and informations to me and also to my audience, which is also, I think, a lot of younger strength and conditioning coaches are listening who are maybe also done studying or was already practitionering in the gyms, and also a lot of coaches from Germany. So thanks for your advice and your informations to me and also to my guests. And I'm very, very happy to have you on here.
Okay, my pleasure. Hey, I got to go.
Yes. Thank you, Mike.
You're going to stop and I'm going to wait till it uploads because you told me to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, then take care and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating or comment, and share it with someone who loves sports science. And for more content, follow me on Instagram at science_in_sports_. See you in the next episode.